The following podcast contains spoilers and words that my mother would prefer I did not say. We watch the thing. We watch the thing. Hello everybody and welcome back to We Watched a Thing. You've got Billy in your ears, but this week you have an extremely special guest. It's a great friend of the show. I've been waiting for so long to have him on and finally he's here. It's Gerald from Two Peas on a Podcast. How you doing, mate?
Extremely special. Wow.
You are extremely special.
I didn't know that was coming, man. Thank you so much. Two adjectives. Billy, I'm good, man. How are you? Thanks so much for having me. We just did an episode of my show right before this, and there's nobody I'd rather spend 2 hours with than you. Well, maybe my wife, but she won't do that with me anymore, so you'll have to do. How are you, man?
Mate, I'm great. It's really good to have you here. I love your show. It's just a lot of fun, and it was so great to finally guest on it. So, I mean, I'll plug that now. We just did top 5 spooky TV shows that'll be coming out start of October.
That's right. Yeah, first week in October. Every year I do this horror theme where every episode is horror related, and I can't help myself as a horror fan. So you came on graciously, and you did the first one, which will be the first week. So this will air before that, I assume.
This will go out this Thursday, yep.
Yeah, so the first week in October, tell Siri or whatever. But yeah, come over there and check me and Billy out talking about spooky TV shows. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and so you reached out to me, you graciously asked me to come on your show, and I said, well, hey, would you like to, while we're doing it, do an episode over here? And I let you pick the movie. Do you want to tell people what you picked and what we're going to be watching this week?
Yeah, man, I really battled with what to pick because I think it kind of started because Wednesday, the Netflix series is coming out, and Tim Burton's kind of back in the conversation, if you will, pop culture-wise. And I'm a huge Tim Burton fan. If I was doing my personal Mount Rushmore of filmmakers, he would be on there. Like he's easily in my top 5 filmmakers. And that's even with all the quote unquote shit that he's done in the last 10 years or so. But even with all that, like I'm just such a huge fan of his catalog. And I said, well, man, and you threw a few at me that you had never done. And I'm like, oh my God, you've never done any of these? Like these are so special to me. I didn't know what to pick. Yeah. But hopefully you'll have me back whenever you talk Edward Scissorhands or Batman Returns. But tonight we're doing Batman, 1989's Batman.
Yes, we are. Oh, mate, we should definitely do Edward Scissorhands at some point.
Oh, for sure.
I'm not going to lie to you. I was a bit, when you said to me, Tim Burton's one of my favorites, I was like, oh, really? Because I'm not a massive Tim Burton fan.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
But Edward Scissorhands was one of the few that I remember really liking, but I've only seen it once. I was 9 years old, and I bawled my eyes out so hard.
Yeah, no, it's good, man. It's really good.
Yeah, because I'm a crier at the best of times, and that movie, something in it broke me. I remember to this day I was eating from this place called Arnold's Ribs and Pizza, this kind of local franchise here. Mm-hmm. I haven't eaten since. I can't eat that food because it makes me cry just thinking about that movie.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Edward is a touching story about being different, right? I mean, that's essentially what it is at its core, and love and loss. And I really, like I said, I really battled with well, what do we talk about? But in my mind, I wanted to help you out too, Billy, because I'm thinking, what podcast has not talked about Batman '89? And I guess it's We Watched a Thing, So let me help you out here, but. I tell you, man, it was a really hard choice for me because this one, Batman Returns and Edward Scissorhands are all top tier Tim Burton for me. So it was tough, but I feel like this one is probably his most iconic. And I feel like it really, in other words, if you were what's Tim Burton got in the game when it comes to changing cinema, and changing movie going, I feel like it's Batman '89 for sure.
For sure. All right, well, let's get into it then. Batman is a 1989 superhero film based on the DC Comics character of the same name. It's produced by John Peters and Peter Guber, and of course is directed, as by you said, Tim Burton. It stars Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton, Kim Basinger, Robert Wuhl, Pat Hingle, Billy Dee Williams, and Jack Palance. And what is it about, Gerald?
Well, you just told us what it's about. But it's essentially about Batman's kind of like, it's not his origin story, but it's an introduction to how he's protecting Gotham, and his most kind of notable villain and nemesis is the Joker, and we get introduced to their rivalry in this film, and like I said, it's Batman kind of protecting Gotham from the Joker, and that's his ultimate goal in this movie.
Yeah, nice. Let me ask you this. I know that you're a little bit older than me. Do you remember when you first saw this movie? Were you old enough to see it when it came out?
Dude, one of the reasons I actually chose this is because I was 14 when this movie came out. And
right, yeah.
There was a movie theater, I'll never forget, actually. It's on Sardis Road in Charlotte, North Carolina. And my parents dropping me off there. And the reason I'm bringing that up to you is because that was my first kiss. Was after this movie,
mate.
I know, right? But a young lady named Kathy that I've lost touch with, but we were in middle school at the time, and we shared a kiss after this film outside the movie theater. But I'll never forget it. A, for that reason, but B, because this was like the pinnacle of like kind of almost like Jaws in '75, where it's like blockbuster, like. Everybody, like lines around the theater, and because we didn't have social media back then, you have to remember. So word of mouth and just the excitement and the build up for just this character that had been embedded in our minds from a pop culture and like comic book perspective, and I'm talking about Batman, and the fact that it was going to be on the big screen. Before this, we had the Christopher Reeve Superman films and a couple others, but there was nothing on this scale, dude. And that's why I had to pick this film, is because the Tim Burton kind of bias aside, like it really started what we now take for granted. I feel like as a society in the superhero movie on the 100%. On the big screen, and I'll never forget it for that reason.
These days you could walk into a cinema, kick a stone, and you're likely to hit a poster for a superhero film.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. This was like, I think that the kind of modern superhero film was kind of rebirthed by the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a bit of a gap, and this kind of kicked off a bit of a gothic superhero film. And we got Darkman not long after this. I think we got Spawn, The Crow, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But you're absolutely right. This was a massive deal. Obviously, I wasn't old enough to see this when it came out, but this was still 100% the first Batman film that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Were you an established Batman film, an established Batman fan prior to seeing this? Like, were you a reader of the comics at all? Or?
Yeah, that's what made it special, because my dad, and I think about my son now. We talked about this on my show when we recorded earlier, but, my son's going to be 9 next month. And I was around the same age, maybe 10 years old, maybe a little bit older. But my dad, back then in the 80s, it was like, what can you bribe your kids with? So now I bribe my kids with screen time or, video games or a trip to the arcade or whatever. But, back then for me, my dad would take me to the comic book shop once a week. And I remember there was literally one in our town that sold comics. And we went there once a week, and he would let me pick out a comic. And I tended to always pick out the Batman comics, and they were a little bit darker. And I can remember my mom like, "Why'd you let him get this? Like, he's killing people. Like, it's super dark,
Yeah.
But it was either always that, or I did like Spider-Man too back in the day. So it was one or the other. But I did have that connection too. But it was funny because at 10, 11 years old, like I was getting these comic books almost as a connection with my dad, but I never really read them. Does that make sense? Like, I just collected them, but like I didn't take them home and read them,
Yeah.
But I did have that fond memory as well. And then 3-4 years later, to be like, oh shit, like this is going to be on the big screen, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know who Tim Burton was at the time, like Michael Keaton. I'd seen him, Mr. Mom, and like whatever, but I didn't like know at 14 years old that what I was walking into.
Yeah.
yeah, I did have a somewhat of a connection to it.
Well, let's get straight into it then, and let's start, I reckon, with Burton and the kind of aesthetic of the film.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, this is a fucking great looking film, and I think tonally, this is still one of the best superhero films to date. I think that this balances the kind of comedy and silliness that inherently comes with a character like this, along with the gritty, like you said, he's shooting people, he's killing people. I think it balances all that really, really well.
Yeah. I mean, it's easily, I mean, this depiction of Batman is easily one of my favorites because, like, it shows the duality of, like, him dealing with ultimately just being alone in the world. Yeah. I mean, that's really what the tragic kind of origin of, like, Bruce Wayne and Batman is that he is, like, sacrificed basically having essentially any kind of life so that he can protect the city that he loves. And that's kind of the essence of the character. And I feel like Burton knew that and kind of in a weird way kind of also feels that way as a filmmaker. That, you know, because he has this kind of like emo like reputation where he's like also kind of a loner. And, you know, if you were looking at like Batman as a superhero and you look at Tim Burton as a filmmaker, it's kind of like apples to apples. And I feel like that's why he was perfect for these first two films that we got on the big screen and this one in Returns. And he really, in a way, almost told his story through the Batman character while also kind of incorporating all the things that we loved about the character if you read the comics.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100%, man. Like, you know, Burton just really created it. And he has his own style. Like,
yeah, definitely.
He's one of the very, very few filmmakers, and I could count them on one hand, where you could go in blind and like watch a movie and know it was his.
Yeah,
you know, like
100%.
or at least guess and be pretty close. Like he just has this certain aesthetic and environment that he builds in his movies that are pretty constant throughout his filmography, and he just has those idiosyncrasies that he goes back to. And you know, there's very few filmmakers where you just know their work because they're so unique. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like even with a character like Batman, he was still able to display that.
Yeah, definitely, it's true. It's like the color palette of the film and the cinematography, the way that the city of Gotham is a character in this film,
right? In
ways that I still don't think we've seen really in other Batman films to this extent.
No, I agree.
Where you really, the world building is fantastic. Even simple things like the smoke and steam everywhere, like that just really sells it as a real city, while also just quite frankly looking really cool.
Right.
I just think it's really well done.
Right, I agree. You know, I think that, and I love the version that came out this year as well with Pattinson.
Yeah,
and there's been some other ones that I honestly, if I'm being honest with you, every Batman movie that's come out since this movie, I've enjoyed on some level.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know that they've necessarily risen to the Burton level for me personally, but I've liked them all. Like I've never seen one and been like, oh, I hate this.
Yeah.
But I do think that with this one and with Returns, Burton did do what you just said. He really made it a point to make Gotham an integral part of the characters that we see in the movie, as opposed to some of the later iterations where it's like, it's taking place in Gotham, but there's nothing to really show us that, like other than them just saying it or it being a title card. But this movie and Returns, you know, and part of that is the way he builds worlds when he makes movies, but we can't help but like, I mean, we see it. It's right in front of us. So he's really presenting it to us as a character. I agree with you.
I've got to ask because, I mean, obviously you love this film, so I'm assuming that you love Keaton as Batman. Is he Batman to you?
He is. A lot of people ask, who's your Batman, who's your Superman, this and that. I mean, he's my Batman. And I think that it's a bit unfair because when you grow up and when you're impressionable, that's going to be the one that's going to stick with you. And like I said, I was 13, 14 years old when these movies started coming out. And that was the first realization off of the comic book page that I had seen of this character. Now, my son hasn't seen these yet, but, let's say he's 12 years old and I introduce him to the DC EU as it is now. Maybe Ben Affleck will be his Batman. I don't know. You know what I mean? But it's just like, or a blockbuster comes out and we go to the theater to see it, and that's what's impressionable on him. Like, equally, I'll tell you, like Miles from Spider-Man, that's his Spider-Man. I mean, he didn't tell me that, but if I ask him that, that's probably what his response is going to be, because we saw the Spider-Verse in the theaters a couple years ago, and like, he read those, and like, he's very impressionable right now in his life. So it's a no-brainer for me. I'm not necessarily comparing Batmans and like, Kilmer versus like Keaton and all that stuff. Like, I could tell you who I think did better at, this and that. But like, at the end of the day, like, that's my Batman, because that's the one that really made the biggest impression on me as a youngster.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I think Keaton is fantastic in this film. I don't think it's necessarily his performance or anything, but I think the writing of the film, I think that this is the best iteration of both Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Right.
I think there's some other films that have had really good Batmans, but I haven't liked the Bruce Wayne characterization.
Or so the other way around, right?
Yeah. And that's a problem with every kind of superhero, like it was the same with the Spider-Man films. Like, I thought Tobey Maguire was a great Peter Parker, but not a great Spider-Man, for example.
Right.
With this, I just think that it's just the way they've characterized it. I think he's really, really great in both of those shoes. And I think that's what makes me love this film so much, is that it's not just a Batman movie. It's a Bruce Wayne movie too.
And I think Keaton understood that, man. I think and I agree with everything that you just said 100%. I think that as an actor, he understood that. And he said, look, I'm this quirky billionaire who is kind of absent-minded, but very intelligent at the same time. And I'm kind of getting my way through business. I'm doing these different deals, and like, I'm kind of fumbling through it, and I'm successful for a reason. But, when I put on the cowl and like, I want to save the city, like, he's just a different, like, it just transforms him to a different person. And I feel like that speaks a lot to Michael Keaton as an actor. Like, he really was able to do, he really essentially played two different people in these movies. There's Batman, which is a very reserved, serious, and then you have Bruce Wayne, and his Bruce Wayne is very comical and kind of like slapstick almost, which is crazy, because it's two completely different personalities that he has to embody. And he's such a phenomenal actor. Like, if I was doing my top 10 actors of the last like 20 years, I feel like Keaton would have to be in there. Like, he just really, he can do comedy, he can do drama, he can obviously do action. He knows what he's doing. I mean, he's a very, very good actor, I feel like.
100% agree with that. I mean, you look at some of his recent performances, Birdman. I loved him as the Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Yeah, dude, he was really good.
And that's the thing. He's been one of the best on-screen heroes, and now one of the best on-screen villains as well.
And sympathetic. And as the Vulture, it's interesting that you mentioned that one, because I remember watching that and going, well, this is a callback to his portrayal of Batman, because it was very sympathetic. In other words, I could very easily see, had Batman not been a DC property and just been a, X superhero or whatever you want to fill in the blank, that character turning into what the Vulture became in that Spider-Man film. Like, he really did kind of call back to his roots in the superhero genre, I felt like, in that movie with Spider-Man.
Yeah. Let's get onto the villains in this film then.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, fuck me, this is a great Joker, I think.
Oh my God, dude. How fucking good is this?
Yeah. Jack Nicholson. I think this honestly might be my favorite Jack Nicholson performance.
Wow. It's, I'm sitting here like, oh my God, what do I say? But you know what? I think I might agree with you. I mean, I really, really, I just can't get over my love for him in A Few Good Men and his portrayal, and that movie is kind of like the antagonist, anti-hero kind of guy. But yeah, I mean, think about it, dude. Like, it's weird because when I talk to you about this, I'm sure The Dark Knight's going to come up in the Nolan films, and I love those as well, and Heath Ledger and all of it. But like, think about it in '89. Like, there was no on-screen depiction, with the exception of the '60s TV show.
Yeah, Cesar Romero. Yeah,
which I also love, by the way.
Yeah, same. Yep. I mean, it's a lot campier, and I think this one straddles that ground. Like I said, I think tonally this entire film does. I think balance is really nice between the camp and the grit. But I mean, Nicholson was a genius choice.
I mean, it's just like, what are we going to do, guys? Like, we have arguably the most iconic villain in history, one of at least. And it's like, what are we going to do? How are we going to display this in a 2-hour movie? And you bring in this actor who in '89 was an Oscar winner. He was like considered one of the greatest of all time already in '89. And you know, it's like, all right, we're gonna bring this guy in. We're gonna put makeup on him, and he's gonna basically do his thing. And he did. I mean, he was essentially Jack Nicholson. I mean, he, you know, knew the comic, and he studied it, and he researched it. He knew what he was portraying, but like at the same time, it was like, I'm kind of this like madman who's almost happy that this tragedy befell me because now I can use it to, you know, take over Gotham City, and kind of almost as an excuse to murder and mayhem and do all these things. And the fact that it was Jack Nicholson behind that kind of quote unquote mask was just, I don't know, it was tremendous at the time. Like, you know, I was too young to realize the impact of what I was watching. But when you look back on it now, like I told you, I rewatched it last night for probably the 50th time or 100th time. And like, it's just, like, I love Keaton in this, but to see what Nicholson does in this is just literally mesmerizing, that he just reinvented an iconic character in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And just elevates it so much. Like, I was exactly the same. You know, like, you watch this movie as a kid, you don't know who Jack Nicholson is. You haven't seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or, you know, any of those, The Shining, for example. Like, you don't know that he's this incredible actor. You don't appreciate what you're seeing on screen. Right. When I watched this last night, it must have been the first time in at least 10 to 15 years that I've seen this movie. Yeah. Okay. And I was so taken aback by just how good that performance was.
Yeah. I mean, it's tremendous, man, because he borrows a little bit from the pages of the comic with a little bit of the campiness and the cheesiness. But like, he brings such this like eerie, like, I don't know, it's almost like you're it's like you feel safe, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a weird, like, and he does that as an actor in his portrayal. And, you know, the scene when he fucking burns a guy alive with the,
how great is that scene?
And then everybody leaves, and he's doing this monologue where he's like talking to the corpse, and like, I don't know, you get a sense like he is that character. He's the Joker, where he can't really understand what's real and what's a world that he's created in his mind. And you know, Nicholson did really phenomenal things with that character, I felt like. And, you know, it was a role that an actor of his caliber could have very easily like phoned in, you know what I mean? And just got the paycheck, but he made it a memorable performance that will never be forgotten by any Batman fan.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it must have been a massive deal at the time for a guy of this caliber to be doing, you know, and it's not even like superhero movies were a thing now. Like, you look at the MCU now, and it's like, they can grab whatever actor they want. But, you know, I still think you look at Helen Mirren hopping in Fast and Furious, and everyone was like, what are you doing? And she's not doing anything to elevate that role. I mean, I don't know how you could, but it's just kind of like a paycheck in a franchise film. But Nicholson didn't treat this movie like that at all.
No, he didn't. He really bought into the vision of Tim Burton, I feel like, and to the lore of Batman. And, he had a little bit of the Cesar Romero in there, and he had a little bit of what we envisioned would if the comic book pages would come to life. But 80% of it was like him kind of doing his thing, which is kind of like almost like if I had to put a tag on it, it would say like playful psychotic.
Yes,
you know what I mean? Like, whereas you fast forward to the Heath Ledger portrayal, and that was a much more like subdued, kind of like demented, dark depiction. And I love both of them, but they're very, very different angles,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I don't think I can talk about this movie without talking about, and I get ragged on this all the time for bringing this up, but I'm a score guy. I love score. And I think what Danny Elfman did here is, to this day, still the best superhero film score that we've ever gotten. I think that this beats out Williams' Superman score for me.
Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I've never thought about the rankings with those scores with John Williams, but I will never refute that what Danny Elfman... This is Danny Elfman's best score.
Oh, absolutely.
Man, that's saying a lot because there's a lot of his shit that I really, really love. But I mean, just that opening sequence, I texted you last night with a photo of me watching it. Chills, bro. I mean, this guy is like a seemingly boring sequence of letters on the screen and these weird black and gray images that we don't... I mean, it eventually ends up being a Batman signal, but... or symbol, but like just that roaring score and how it elevates as, it just builds tension, and it's just so epic and speaks to the legacy of Batman. It really does.
It does, yeah, and it fits in with and I think elevates the tone of the film as a whole. Like, you mentioned earlier with Nicholson's performance about it feeling like the comic pages kind of brought to life. That's kind of how I feel about the entire look of this film, is that it looks like a Batman comic. And I think that is actually really, really hard to pull off without being cheesy. Like I think, you think to like Ang Lee's The Hulk, which lent very heavily into that and did a lot of kind of split screen and kind of panel type looks. And I think that this, without even having to do that, still evoked the feeling of the comics really well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this was it was almost like at times like the lights were off because it was so dark. And I mean, in tone, but also just like cinematically. But I feel like that spoke to this character. I mean, if we're talking about Batman, this is a dark character that was lonely.
Yeah.
He had this one friend in Alfred, and his family was gone. And, this movie even touches on a relationship with Vicky Vale that would really be unheard of in the comics. Like, I mean, this, which I enjoyed, but, this guy was like literally a loner. I mean, he was the epitome of that. And I think you're right. I mean, you spoke to the tone of this movie beautifully, where Burton and Elfman and everybody else that was kind of playing to the tone of the film, kind of like they got the brief, you know what I mean? They knew the assignment.
Yeah, and they're on the same page, which rarely happens.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about Vicky Vale. Where are you on the storyline in general and Kim Basinger? And
First of all, Kim Basinger was freaking hot in 1989, dude, all right? So I'm just going to tell you. That's the first thing. I feel like it was, it didn't need to be there. But, in foresight, it didn't need to be there. But in retrospect, I'm kind of glad it was. Like, it gave us somewhat of a human element to Bruce Wayne in his relationship side. And we see it. I actually like it a little bit more in Returns with Selena Kyle. But we see that kind of play out almost like that sitcom romance kind of banter. Plays out a little bit in both movies, but I like it a little bit more in Returns. But I do like that foundation is kind of set here with Vicky Vale, and we see that he is kind of searching for quote unquote the one or a relationship, and that's not what plays out in the comics unless you're talking about Catwoman specifically, which is another reason why I probably like the Selena Kyle story a little bit more. But nevertheless, it does give us an unexpected new layer to Bruce Wayne, I feel like. And, for that reason, I really enjoyed it. And I love Kim Basinger. And like I said, she's hot as AF in this. So, yeah, I'm okay with it. I mean, it didn't need to be there, but I'm okay with it if that sums it up, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I've never really thought of it that way, but you're right. It really does. Without it, you are kind of missing that extra layer of characterization on Bruce Wayne. And yeah, you're right. That's completely fair. Mm-hmm. I don't think this is a perfect film. I do think there are some weird moments that maybe held up better in the 80s. But
hold on, I mean, what? I didn't know I was getting into this now. I thought I was talking to somebody who knew this was a perfect film.
There's a lot of kind of weird musical moments for me.
Sure, yeah.
They pop up and you sit there for kind of 5 minutes going like, what the fuck is happening now?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't, we chose Batman 89. Let me just ask you, I feel like this is a good segue. Do you like this one or Batman Returns better?
I mean, I think it would almost be unfair for me to answer because much like I said, how I hadn't seen this in about 10, 15 years, it's probably about the same distance to Returns.
It's tough for me, man. Batman Returns is, if you're looking at the act of filmmaking, the craft of filmmaking, is probably a better film.
Yeah.
They do a lot of better things technically. There's a lot more like top tier actors like Michelle Pfeiffer and Danny DeVito and Christopher Walken, and the sets are a little bit better, and like it's probably better made. But I mean, let's just talk about this for a second. And, if your listeners want to bash me, that's fine. But we're in 2022, and you look at all the MCU stuff, even the DCEU stuff, the stuff on Disney Plus, like anything that is originated from like a comic book or a superhero lore is successful and exists because of Batman 89.
Oh, 100%. 100% it does. Yeah.
The reason that, and what this movie did for it literally, and I mean, an argument could be made. I don't know which side I would be on as I'm sitting here talking to you, to be honest, Billy, but an argument could be made for the Christopher Reeve superhero or Superman films. But I'm going to say Batman 89 is really what kind of created the superhero genre that we know today.
Oh, I agree. I love the Superman films, and I'm a giant Superman fan. But I think tonally, they are kind of a different beast. Like, they're nowhere near as campy, obviously, as the 60s Batman series. But I think there's a lot more kind of lightness to the Superman series. This is what made the superhero genre, I think, more seen as something more serious, like not just for children.
Right. I'm just going to tell you right now, if Batman 89 had not, the movie we're talking about, had not been made and released in cinemas and then therefore had not been successful, there would be no MCU.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to tell you, at least not as we know it today. Yeah, that's my opinion. I wholeheartedly believe that.
I agree. Even if this film was made, just if this film had failed, that would have been the end of superhero movies, I think.
Yeah, we'd have got, and another thing, and we didn't talk about this at the top, but, and Billy, remind me, how old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay, so I'm going to be 47 this year. So there's a bit of an age gap there, but let me just, which actually makes this interesting, makes this an interesting question, but, why I have, and I get bashed a little bit by Julio and some other mutual friends of ours, but I have a little bit of like superhero fatigue in 2022. When Batman 89 came out, okay, and when the Superman films came out with Christopher Reeve, like we got a superhero movie like every few years, like 3 to 5 years. Now it's like 3 to 5 weeks. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's a different show or movie, and like they all connect, and like you have to like. But like it was an event, you know what I mean? Like it was like literally like you had to RSVP to an event and you had to be there, and
Yeah.
There was just something different about it. And now it's been, kind of like watered down to and I'm not saying there's not some good stuff. Like, I'm really enjoying She-Hulk right now that just came out. So, there's good stuff out there, and that's not what I'm saying, but it's just become we take it for granted as a society, I feel like.
Oh, 100%. I agree with you completely. I've got mad fatigue.
Right.
And I haven't even seen every MCU film. Like, I think, what are they up to now? 30 something? I think I've probably seen over 20.
I don't even know. I haven't seen the new Thor, but I don't know what number that was, but I haven't seen that one that came out this year. And I just started watching She-Hulk, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that thing, Billy, where I'm like, I'm just going to watch it. And if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. I'm not gonna say I hate it because it's MCU.
Yeah,
but you get what I'm saying though, where it's like Batman '89 came out. We didn't have anything 10 years before that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, so it's just different,
Yeah. Well, and even like Batman '89 was a success, but even then, it's like. I still don't think they'd figured out that was superheroes as a whole. Basically, through the 90s, we really just had Batman films. Like we had Batman Returns and then Forever and Batman and Robin. I don't think it was until basically Spider-Man in 2002 that they were like, all right, let's see if this works with another hero.
Right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. And those movies were great. And, the MCU was kind of birthed with Iron Man, which was also a great film. I think that was 2008.
Yep. And now it's just like you said, 3 weeks, there's another hero.
And there's no looking back, and Kevin Feige and those guys were like, all right, well, we're going to do this, but we're going to do a little bit different because we're going to connect everything.
Yes.
And everything's going to be good. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. I mean, if you live and breathe that's cool, but I don't have time to know who the first cousin of every, what I mean? I just can't do that.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at it on a cinematic enjoyment level, I don't think we're ever as a society, and this is not to take away from 5G or MCU or anybody. I don't think we're ever as a society going to be able to get back to where we were in 1989 with this kind of event based, where we have to go as a collective society to see something.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Especially post-COVID and especially post the MCU TV series becoming a thing, I think that's when the fatigue has really set in for a lot of people. I think back even to even last December when the new Spider-Man came out, I remember that kind of having a little bit of that feeling of being an event. I remember the cinema being packed.
Yeah, and that was part COVID too. But yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. But I'll tell you what, you should come back in about 6 months or so and we'll do Batman Returns as well.
I'm down.
I definitely have to rewatch it.
I'm down. I definitely battle with which one to pick. So maybe since I picked this one, we can do that one next time.
For sure, man.
Yeah,
so,
I'm down, man.
All in all, how are you scoring Batman '89 out of 10? Is this a 10 for you?
A fucking 10, bro. This is...
Whoa.
This is the... Anybody listening that's enjoyed the MCU or the DCEU, it's because of this movie. This, you were right. I mean, it has flaws. I mean, it's not 100% perfect, but because of what it did for movies and because of what it did for me in my life. And
wow, yeah.
I had my first kiss after this movie. Come on, bro.
See, I love that story. To me, that's what the movies are about. Things happen at the movies,
Right.
The only 3 jobs I've ever had was in a cinema, a video store, and then working in film and television. And it's I remember that feeling of going to the movies or going to a video store and hanging out with your friends. And yeah, that's fucking awesome, man. That's great.
Yeah, it's easily a 10 for me, man.
That's nice. Yeah, I'm a 9. I agree with you in a lot of ways. I think that what this film did for the future of cinema was pretty impressive. I think that easily this is my favorite Burton film. I think that, particularly thinking of the last kind of 20 years, I just am really low on Burton, but maybe I've got to revisit that because he clearly knows how to make a movie.
Yeah, wow. Not that you asked me this, but since I can have an internal battle on air, I mean, it's between Batman '89, Edward Scissorhands, and Big Fish for me. Like, those are my top 3 Burton films.
Yeah, right. Yep.
They're all top for different reasons, really, which is weird. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a 3-way tie. Like, I love all those movies pretty much equally. Maybe we'll do Edward at some point in the future too. But
yeah, nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
you're welcome back anytime, Gerald.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, he's one of my favorite filmmakers, and I'm a bit of an apologist for him, but I'm really looking forward to the Wednesday series on Netflix. And
yeah, I'm keen to check that out as well. Are you an Addams Family fan?
I am. In fact, I thought it might come up on our episode that we did for Spooky TV. I kept skirting around it a little bit, but yeah. I went on my friend Ashley's TV podcast, and we did a retrospective of Addams Family. Oh, the
Rabbit Ears?
Yeah, Rabbit Ears. Yeah, we did a retrospective of Addams Family, and I think that's a groundbreaking show, too, because it really incorporates these horror elements, but it makes it like a sitcom. Yeah, which you don't really think about, but when you hear somebody say that or you see it on paper, you're like, wait a minute, what? And that's really what it did. And now it's like not a big deal, but in this, in the 70s when they did that, it was kind of crazy. Yeah, so
definitely. Well, mate, thank you so much for joining me to talk about Batman 89. This has been a heap of fun.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell everybody about Two Peas on a Podcast, where they can find you, what you do over there?
Yeah, I guess, man. If for no other reason, because you're going to be on soon. But yeah, we just do a top 5 countdown show. We have a lot of fun. We come up with a different topic every week, and I have a guest host come on to help me count down our top 5s in that category. Billy and I did top 5 spooky TV shows, which will be coming out in October. But we also do something, or we always do something in the movies, music, TV, pop culture. So check us out. You can find us anywhere you find podcasts at 2 Peas on a Podcast. And you can follow me over on Twitter too. It's 2 Peas on a Pod, and that's TWO spelled out.
Yeah, nice. Highly recommend. It's a great time. Like you said, it's a countdown show, but because you do cover the whole spectrum of pop culture, like I would love to do like some music stuff on here at some point, but I watch a thing. I don't listen to a thing.
I know. As we're talking, my next episode is actually top 5 Pearl Jam songs that one of my patrons wanted to do. So we're going to be talking about Pearl Jam and doing that. But yeah.
Nice. I just finished listening to your top 5 3-hour film episode, and I agree with you all the way. Titanic is one of my favorite films of all time.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude. My heart will go on. I love that movie.
Yes, it will. Fuck yes, it will.
Yes, it will. Float on the door, Billy.
So definitely go check out Gerald's show. It's fantastic. Thank you for joining me, and yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime, mate.
Absolutely, man. Batman Returns is up next.
All right. Next week, Noosk, my beautiful wife, is going to be back on the show, and we're going to be going and checking out 3,000 Years of Longing, new George Miller film, which I'm pretty excited for. And in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, you can do that at wewatchedathing.com or wewatchedathing@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the handle at wewatchedathing. If you want to help support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/wewatchedathing, and I'll catch you next week.